Dr. Anna Maria Thomason has been with the CSA group for 2.5 years, working as a project manager in the standards division, and she's responsible for managing the development of standards in the area of environment and climate change, as well as the built environment sector. And she oversees the development of a wide variety of national, binational, and international standards, and most recently, the adoption of ISO 26000. She got her PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Edinburgh. So I'm just going to pull up her slides here. And here we go. Anna Maria.
Thank you very much, Carnahan. I'm Anna Maria Thomason. I'm from CSA Group. I work in the Standards Development department there. And over the past year, I've been working with our technical committee on organizational social responsibility, guiding the committee through the process for adopting the standard as a national standard of Canada. Okay, it's not working. Okay, so for today, I just want to give you a brief overview of CSA Group and what it is that we do, particularly in the standards division, as well as an overview of how standards work. I see that some questions have popped up already, so I'll try to answer some of those. And then going over what our work was with the technical committee, looking at ISO 26000 over the past year, and what our goals will be moving forward, as well as what some of the activities have been at the international level surrounding ISO 26000. So just a quick overview on CSA Group. We are headquartered in Toronto, Canada, but we do have offices throughout North America, and Europe, and Asia as well. And there are three main branches to our business. We have our consumer product evaluation side, our standards development division, as well as our product certification and testing division. We are a private, not-for-profit, membership-based organization, and we were established in 1990. We actually started out by developing standards for the infrastructure and engineering sector, and from there we just grew, and today we've become the largest and most diversified standards development organization in Canada. And you might have noticed our CSA safety marks on a variety of products, from hockey helmets to toilets, wherever you're kind of paying attention. Now moving on to what the standards division does is we are actually looking after the development of about 3,000 standards and codes in 54 different areas of technology. So there's a huge variety to the standards that we develop. And we're accredited not only by SEC in Canada, but also by ANSI in the US to develop standards. We work with industry members, regulators, government representatives, as well as consumer groups when we're developing our standards. And we have a good reputation for offering independent and objective guidance. So we're an honest broker, and our standards development process is consensus-based. We have an experience developing standards in sensitive topics, for example, privacy or nuclear safety. We recently published a guideline on whistleblowing, so that just gives you some idea of the kind of standards that we've become involved in. We also play a major role in developing standards for emerging technologies, so we like to be on top of things when it comes to new technologies out there that need standards in order to enter the market. So we've developed standards on things such as wind power, electric vehicles, and nanotechnology. Now last but not least, we also have a strong international standards involvement. So we actually hold the secretariat for ISO and IEC committees, as well as working groups. There are five main, groups of standards that at CSA Group. So we have our health and safety branch, our fuel burning standards, sustainability, which is where ISO 26000 and now falls under, energy and utilities, as well as electrotechnical. to better understand how standards can be powerful and how they can be used, it's important to know how they actually work. And what we often find is that the public doesn't always understand whether standards are mandatory or whether they're voluntary. So as a general rule, all standards are voluntary when they are published. Organizations can choose to implement them, to use them, most often as a competitive advantage, or if they see any efficiency benefits there, risk management tools, but they are voluntary. Now, standards can become mandatory when they're referenced in legislation. And we have about 50% of our occupational health and safety standards that are referenced in regulations, and they are mandatory, as well as about 40% of CSA's construction standards. As was mentioned before, standards can be referenced at any level of government, so it could be municipally referenced or provincially or federally. So depending on where you're located, you may or may not have to comply with those standards. And now I'd like to focus on our technical committee on organizational social responsibility and what they've been working on over the past year. So this is a fairly young committee by CSA standards. We have a lot of committees that have been around for 40, 50 years. This particular group was established in 2015. You've already heard from our chair, Mr. David Simpson, and we have our vice chair in the room as well, Mr. Israel Lyon. We have a total current membership of 19, and it's important to understand that the members that are working on our standards are volunteer experts. So they volunteer their time, their knowledge, and their expertise to the standard development process, and we're very, very grateful for their contributions. As with all of our committees, we've worked with a balanced representation across the interest categories that are relevant to the standard. And in this case, we had three interest categories. We had organizational interest, and here, because of the nature of ISO 26000 and how it is intended to be used by all types of organizations, big and small, we tried to have representation from a variety of industries as well. So we had lottery and gaming, real estate, mining, food and beverage, just a wide array of industries represented on our committee. We also had government and regulatory authority representation and non-commercial interest members, such as academics and researchers. Now, once our committee was established, their main role was to assess whether ISO 26000 is appropriate for use by Canadian organizations, and then decide whether the standard should become a national standard in Canada and be adopted as such. In order to make this decision, the committee had to understand whether there are any roadblocks to the implementation of the ISO 26000 standard in Canada, and whether it goes against any existing regulations or existing practices in Canada. They also had to determine whether Canadian deviations are required. And what we mean by deviations are additional recommendations or requirements that can be used to maybe complement or add into any gaps that might be found lacking in the standard. So if there are any areas that are of particular interest in the Canadian landscape, they could be addressed through deviations. Now, the downside of having deviations is that you're kind of moving away from a harmonized international standard, and you're potentially creating problems for organizations that operate internationally. So over the past year, the committee has made excellent progress. They've completed a thorough review of ISO 26000, and we've officially adopted the standard as a national standard of Canada. The committee also decided not to include Canadian deviations. However, over the past year, we've had many discussions during which we've identified a series of issues that may require further attention. And there are a variety of tools available for addressing them, one of which is the creation of additional guidance documents that could be used hand in hand with the ISO 26000 standard to help in the implementation of the standard, as well as through the addition of new recommendations or modifications in the next revision of ISO 26000. So far I've talked about what we've done at the Canadian Technical Committee level. At the international level, ISO 26000 is the responsibility of what is called the post-publication organization, and Carnahan mentioned that as well. So the PPO have decided to launch a systematic review, and that will begin in October 2016. And what the systematic review is a period of 5 months during which all national bodies that were involved in the development of the standard will be given an opportunity to review the standard again and provide their recommendations for any updates or modifications that should be made to the standard in the future edition. So once those comments are received by the PPO, they'll then review them and decide whether they should proceed with developing a new edition of the standard. Now, bearing in mind, it does take time to develop a standard at the ISO level. As Carnahan mentioned, the first edition took 5 years. The next edition should be less than that, but the earliest date of a new edition is 2020. In addition to the systematic review, the PPO has also been working on a series of linkage documents. And these are intended to provide additional guidance to users that are looking to implement ISO 26000, but they're also aware of some of the other existing schemes and initiatives around social responsibility. And they want to understand what's the relationship between ISO 26000 and these other initiatives. How can they be used together, or can they be used together? Where do they connect? And that's the purpose of these linkage documents. So some of them have already been published and they're available online. Other ones are still in progress and should be out in the near future. So now coming back to the Canadian Technical Committee in terms of what we'll be doing in the future, the first task will be to submit recommendations to the PPO through the upcoming systematic review to make sure that the Canadian recommendations are being taken into consideration as part of the next edition. They'll also be considering the development of potentially additional guidance documents that could help with the implementation of ISO 26000.